I would like to thank Theo
for the... Raouf, please let me introduce.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Thank you very much, but I would like to give some facts on the labor market and Africa demography before presenting my eminent speakers. Okay, so things that we read from the literature, from the news are the following. Okay, the first point is that the Population Council in 2020 indicates that the population of Africa is projected to double from 1.2 billion in 2020 to 2.4 billion by 2050. By 2050. Another point is that following Lam or even if the annual growth rate of sub-Saharan Africa working age population is set to peak at around 3% a year, around 2055, rather in absolute term, a peak of 2.3 million new entrants a month will be reached in 2055. So these are some facts. And such a pronounced increase in the share of working age population could lead to some chaos in sub-Saharan Africa should the performance of a country's economy weaken. In 2016, the African Development Bank estimated that 10 to 12 million young people enter the labor market each year, with only 3.1 million new formal jobs being created. Fortunately, the total dependency ratio is expected to continue to fall in sub-Saharan Africa over the next decade till 2070 due to the high but slowly declining child dependency ratio. In effect, a sharp fall in the dependency ratio as a result of an accelerated demographic transition could impact economic growth, hence bring to reality Africa's demographic dividend. Of course, jobs have been created in African countries, but many of these jobs are in the formal sector, what could lead to some underemployment crisis. Okay, there is a need of adding a high number of new jobs in sub-Saharan Africa each year for decades to come. And for following this author, Abdichev et al. In 2018 indicated that it would be more likely that a technological change in sub-Saharan Africa complement labor rather than to completely substitute to it. But skill bias technological change requires more and more skilled workers for the use of a new production technique, at least during the adjustment process. And another alternative solution to all that we are observing would be the integration of African economies into the global value chain. But for that to happen, a lot needs to be done, especially all of these will require a good deal of investment in human capital, in human empowerment, and female education, along with a sustainable transformative structure of African economies. So these are factors that I wanted to, to put forward and introduce our panel. So for this, given this background, the panel will allow not only our three eminent speakers to share their views, but also the floor to add their experiences on the interaction between demography and the labor market in Africa. Especially, we have three eminent speakers, and the three eminent speakers are, first, we have Prof. Raouf, who is a professor of economics at the University of Aix-Marseille since 2011. I will let the presentation to this point, professor of economics at the University of Aix-Marseille since 2011. The second speaker is Dr. Eleni Itbarek. She is a senior lecturer at the University of Pretoria. She has a strong background in quantitative analysis and extensive experience in designing, analyzing household survey data. The third panelist is Professor Francis Menjo-Baye, who obtained his PhD from University of Reading, UK in 1991. Actually, Prof. Baye is well known in the network, in the AERC network, as a researcher, as a resource person, and else. We will get to know more about him on the subject of the day. So, having presented our speakers, let me move to Prof. Raouf. I have a question for him. will have a question for others. He will start by answering, and other panelists could add to the responses that he gave to his own question. Actually, I have two questions for Prof. Raouf. I will start with the first one. So the first question, Prof, is how do you expect the demographic transition to impact the future labor market in Africa? You have the question yourself, and I hope that you followed my question. How do you expect the demographic transition to impact the future labor market in Africa?
That's the first question. Thank you very much, Bernadette. And of course, I would like to thank Theo for the invitation and the whole consortium for this invitation. The topic is really hot, very hot, not only in sub-Saharan Africa, but also in North Africa, as you know. You have mentioned several things, Bernadette, and I will basically develop some of the points you already mentioned. This said, given that I'm rather, I started working a lot on the theory, on mathematical theory of demographic transition and relationship with growth, I will start by making some qualifications. It seems almost trivial to assert that there exists a relationship between demography and growth. The idea is quite old and say that if you reduce mortality, then it's good for growth. And if you have a larger birth rate, then it's bad for growth. This is the typical, I would say, affirmation you can find in the literature, and most of them are only correlations. The relationship between demography and employment is even much trickier, because then you have all the story of the institution of the labor market and also demand for labor, which includes the technological trends and things like this. So theoretically speaking, the question is complicated, and we should, of course, take away from that it's likely to be even more complicated for a continent like ours, for the series of reasons I will develop. Well, you would immediately get why most of the stories are wrong. The easy stories are wrong. For example, if you decrease mortality, well, it's good for growth if it affects primarily those who work, who are likely to work. If mortality, which is the case in sub-Saharan Africa, if it affects elderly, then the impact on growth is almost zero, or even negative. You see what I mean? So relating demography to growth by two single parameters or variables like birth rates and mortality rates is wrong. The problem is not finite dimension, this infinite dimension. What we have to look at is at the age structure. Of course, you can divide it into several classes, but then the point is really to look precisely at the age structure. That's what I have been doing for the last 2 decades. Look at this very seriously and try to apply to Africa and to other countries as well. Of course, if the relationship between growth and demography is complicated, the relationship between demography and employment is even trickier. So if a policymaker comes and asks me what are the important things to look at, I will not tell him that the problem is infinite dimensional. I have been advisor to the Algerian Prime Minister, and I know that's not the kind of answer I have to give. If I have to give an answer, is look at the youth, the youngsters. That's the important thing. And here comes the main point I would like to make today. I think if you take away something, I'm just trying to identify. If you want to take something from this, is the story of the demographic transition. I will comment on this. I'm just making a small introduction. Suppose that the demographic transition goes very well, and then you have this birth rates declining smoothly to about 10 per thousand. Same thing for mortality, very low. So it's all right. But as we'll see later, this will not happen in Africa for most of the countries before 2045, 2050, depends on the institutes and the projections. In the meanwhile, you will have a big problem. And the big problem is what the economists call the youth bulge, which means that you will have, in the course of transition from age structures dominated by children to age structure dominated by workers, you will have a problem. And this problem, of course, you will have a demographic dividend in the sense that you will have more people who will be able to work. But you will have a problem which has to do with youth unemployment. And of course, the associated social unrest, which has been documented by many papers in the academic research. And this is not only a problem in Africa, it's a problem everywhere. If you look at the ELO numbers, you will see that in all the average ratio of youth employment to overall adult employment in the world is about 2.7. But in sub-Saharan Africa, and also in Northern Africa, it's worse. The worst situation is in Africa. So our problem as Africans is how to solve the youth bulge problem, which is inherent to any demographic transition. As Bernadette has mentioned, I think I cannot share any figure, so I will just tell you the story. And I have to be precise here. I will use in my comments the projections of the United Nations, knowing that they are not the most correct. They have been updated several times, but they are not very rigorous. I would rather advise to have a look at other institutes' projections like the one by my Austrian friends of the Wittgenstein Center. But the idea is that we are in a situation in which in 2015 and probably until 2025, only 2 countries have completed their demographic transition, Seychelles and Mauritius. And there are other in the course of to complete their transition. Kenya is among them. They are what we used to call in demographic, they are in the second phase in demographic transition, in the sense that while mortality has declined a lot in Africa, you know, that's because typically infant mortality has declined a lot. Fertility rates are still very, very high, And if you just look at crude birth rates, which should be in a modern completed transition about 10 per thousand, only Mauritius and Seychelles are in this situation. It's expected that, depending on policies, of course, this is just a picture of 2020, it depends on policies which will follow. But if everything remains as it is, we will have more countries joining this small group in 20 years. In the meanwhile, we will have problems. And and of course, in the course of this very slow dynamics, unless there is policy intervention, I will mention the kind of policies we can make to speed up the transition. But again, this is not a guarantee that you will have a decline in the youth bulge and its implications for youth unemployment. So in the meanwhile, we will have problems. As Bernadette mentioned, the dependency rates are still very high and will be high. They cannot be low when you look at the data. The fertility rate are still very high in Africa. I just have a number here. I can give it to you. If you look at fertility rates and compare it with Latin America, we have seen the professor from Latin America yesterday, and you see that the difference is huge, that the average in Africa is 5. This is total fertility rate, compared to less than 2 in Europe, or something close to 2 in Latin America. So it's impossible. And of course, I'm not mentioning all the kind of things you can see. Even in Kenya, from a region to another, you will see a fertility rate which is 7 somewhere and 3 in other regions. So the disparities are huge. Okay, so this we know. So my response to Bernadette is to say that, that we are very far. Well, we are far from the demographic transition. Of course, this is a provisional stuff, and we can speed up. We can speed up the transition and not wait until 2045 or 2050, because we have this youth bulge problem to treat. This said, I just want to warn you in something. Then I will finish my answer to the first question. We perfectly know how to speed up the transition. There are thousands of reports. They say almost the same thing. I don't know if there's a copy paste playing there, but if you go from UNESCO to the IMF to the ILO, they say the same thing. We have 3 types of policies to speed up the transition. We have this education, of course, educations of girls, notably. There's a famous report of UNESCO saying that if all the girls in Africa complete their primary school, then we'll have -7% infertility rates. That's a number. The second thing is, of course, healthcare provision and, of course, safety nets. That's something we know. And the third thing is all what we can do to fight social norms, basically, for example, by speeding contraception. Suppose you do that, and you complete the transition not by 2040, but by 2030 everywhere. Will this solve the bulge, the youth bulge? No, it's not sure at all. It's not sure at all. There's a recent study by, I'm just trying to find, since I cannot show you the figures. There's a recent study by Newhouse and Wolf. That's just 1 year or 2 years ago. And they work on 83 developing countries. Econometrics, it's not correlation, so they test. And they find that a -10% reduction in the size of new cohorts has almost no effect on employment and of employment of the youth, especially in the average decrease following a 10% in reduction in the new cohorts is only 0.7% in employment. in unemployment. The countries which would benefit the most from this reduction in the size of new cohorts are the middle income countries. Then you can have something for the age class from 15 to 19. So we have to be careful. That's this story, which is conveyed by many international things, institutions are of course correct, but they don't solve the youth purge, which is what threatens Africa in the next decades. That's for the first question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Raouf. In your presentation, you emphasize, on age structure. You emphasize on the need to speed up policies and in order to, to manage the demographic transition. So the question that leads us to your second question, the second question being, is actually the labor market in Africa prepared to absorb the incoming labor force? You said we should be careful, that we should be prudent in a way, but to your views, is the labor market in Africa prepared? If the question should not be put in terms of is, would the labor market be prepared?
Yes, I
to
got
absorb the incoming labor force. So this is your second question. You have 7 minutes to cover that.
That's okay. I'm controlling my time. Since I will not show graphics, that would be much shorter.
Okay,
look, that's something we can rephrase as follows. First, there's another qualification I have to do. The labor market in Kenya has nothing to do with a labor market in Senegal, for example, to give an example. So this is a very rough question, actually. There are, I don't know how to call this, but there are very, very, very big heterogeneities. This said, I will say the following. It's certainly the case that the sub-Saharan, at least, sub-Saharan, I'm not talking about North Africa, which is a different story. The sub-Saharan labor markets are rather dynamic in the sense that if you look at the data, again, these are data which we can discuss later maybe. You see that in the two first decades of the current century, job creation has not been bad at all. Basically, if you look at the data we have from ILO, from the International Labour Office, you will see that the growth rates of population and the growth rate of job creation is almost, it goes in parallel. That's good. So it's dynamic. Now, if you look in detail, as you mentioned, Bernadette, then the story is quite different. And this is very known in dozens of reports which have been published recently. I don't want to repeat again what everybody knows. Just to make some important observations. It's true that the quality of jobs created is low. This everybody knows. But this goes together with the lack of what we call in economics, and it becomes something which is more important than growth, actually. It has to do with the weak structural change in Africa. That's the creation of enough jobs, high productivity jobs, so that people can get out agriculture, not massively, but at least in sizable cohorts. What we observe is that these are also new results. Structural change is slower than expected. There is no hope to see any kind of regional convergence there. And the impact on poverty reduction is not that big, to not say it is small. The second point is therefore, and everybody knows this, We know perfectly that the Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, has the lowest share of employment in manufacturing. And if we look at the job creation, the last data, lots of jobs have been created in agriculture and in services. But if you look at services, you will observe that it's not modern services. These are simply the traditional services, trade versus high-tech exports. For example, you will see this very clearly, which means that that's very important that as it is now, the two sectors on which Africa could hope to have the sufficient productivity gains to create high quality job, well, are fading away. So we have to do something here. That's very clear because you know that productivity, we know that productivity in manufacturing tends to converge to the global frontier, and we know that it's the same for modern services. We are very far from the good numbers to claim or to be hopeful on productivity gains in Africa. So, of course, we could say the labor, and I finish with this in 2-3 minutes. We could say that the labor market is dynamic, and we have this fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, etc., etc. And then we can hopefully leapfrog. That's the miraculous word we hear. I read recently, that's a paper in the Financial Times explaining why this view is not serious. Well, it has proved perfectly justified in, for example, a mobile phone technology, mobile money, and Kenya is, as you know, pioneering in that. But could we decently argue that Africa and the labor markets are prepared to that? There are some arguments, of course. If you look at penetration rate of internet in Africa, it's rather good. The growth rates are huge, more than 100% in the last 2 decades. There are very good educational, let's say, institutions which are working. Example, the agreement between Microsoft and the Ethiopian government. There are other very smart things, smart infrastructure going on in Nigeria. We have this famous Vivada rural solutions. There are many things going on. But can we decently claim that the labor market is with this is prepared to direct the incoming generation into the fourth revolution with absolutely no problem? Certainly not. We cannot go play this game, I would say, and we cannot. And the politicians, the policymakers, should not go and then say, I read this. One leader, an African leader, saying, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough. I'm trying to find the quotation. We don't have enough lawyers, we don't have enough doctors, but artificial intelligence will leapfrog this. This is the typical thing. I read it it is in the Financial Times article. Sub-Saharan Africa cannot be a final user of artificial intelligence. And you know why? Because how do you want to employ the next generation? You need some labor intensity. So we have to be innovative and do not follow the Indian example. I would advise you to look at this very good report by ILO, how Europeans and Americans and multinationals are reshoring their labor intensive informatic tasks from India to their countries, because of course artificial intelligence is threatening jobs everywhere. So they will reshore this kind of things. So I can speak hours about this. I will stop here. That's it.
Thank you, Prof. Raouf. To the second question, should you know, is the labor market in Africa prepared to observe? You said that a lot can be observed in Africa, especially internet penetration, as you know, concern Africa's joining the fourth industrial revolution. That we can think about leapfrogging, but we need to be skeptical as to claim, you know, the preparedness of our labor market. But let us listen to, we will come back to that when we get the question to Dr. Eileen. We will get a discussion, a forum discussion on the fourth industrial revolution. For the time being, let us move to the second panelist, to Prof. Baye. Prof. Baye, your question is to know what are the potential strategies to prepare the economic system to cope with the expected job creation need in Africa. For sure, we need a lot. And in my introduction, I said that the need is huge. So please let us know what are the potential strategies in order to cope with the need that Africa is facing. So in 10 minutes, you will give us your thought about this question. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Chair. I will start by indicating that to harness the youth board that the professor just mentioned, the underlying policy objective is to prepare the labor market. This entails creating opportunities, using educational and labor market interventions, as well as enabling the use of appropriate technology, revamping capabilities by recycling and upgrading skills where skills gained in the past mismatch the current labor market requirements, including the ability of individuals and employers to make right decisions, and giving a second chance to laggards. That is by providing access to services that can help them restart their economic and personal lives. The institutional setup that defines economic reforms should aim to structurally transform the economy, which entails identifying comparative advantages and creating competitive advantages, as well as upgrading factor endowments and using industrial policy, taking into consideration the public goods content of private technological innovations. In this regard, structural change and productivity growth are typically accompanied by adjustments in the labor market, and workers are expected to move from traditional livelihoods towards employment opportunities that offer better income prospects or support income diversification strategies of households. In the next 2 decades, the expected job creation needs in sub-Saharan Africa will be huge, and the process is going to be very challenging for labor market stakeholders. To better prepare the future on the demand side of labor market, countries are expected to build a strong economic base by concentrating on the following drivers of growth and job creation. The first, development of manufacturing industries is a major avenue for future jobs in sub-Saharan Africa. This involves the modernization of the production system, and the upgrading of enterprises a key to improving their competitiveness, increasing the use of local inputs, establishing national champions, intensifying measures to improve the business climate, promoting local manufacturing, locally manufactured furniture by using the public procurement system, locally processing most agricultural and livestock products using appropriate technologies, improving electric power supply. Secondly, development of new infrastructure remains one of the key drivers of economic growth. This includes building, construction and rehabilitation of roads, motorways, ports, and dams, strengthening the telecommunications development strategy by connecting households and companies to the optical fiber network, improving the quality of internet services, developing the digital economy, and modernizing transport services. Thirdly, encouraging the participation of the diaspora in development and economic diplomacy. The diaspora can be incentivized to participate in funding projects and creating companies, as well as investing in priority growth subsectors, improving brand image, improving the attractiveness of Made in Africa, and attracting FDI into the continent. In this regard, there may be some wisdom for governments to address the impending issue of double nationality. Fourthly, contingent to the size of the informal sector, sub-Saharan African countries are expected to promote the setting up of development cooperative societies to enable members benefit from privileged access to land, water, and credit, facilitate access to other inputs and equipment, technologies embedded in basic processing units, and to participate in joint marketing of produce to enjoy better prices. The fifth point, creation of sites suitable for specific informal activities, ensuring effective decentralization and local development. Typically, policy prescriptions to combat the downside of a youth bulge include enhancing job readiness, as we indicated, schooling and training interventions, creating jobs by fashioning an enabling environment using active industrial policy interventions, improving access to family planning interventions, or doing nothing, which is the devil's alternative, which is tantamount to declaring war to solve an unemployment problem. Thank you. That is the issues that I have on the first question.
Thank you, Prof. Baye. From what you said, one point, industrialization matters in Africa. That's the point that I will take to summarize all that you said. Okay, you told me about local, to encourage a local champion, to encourage a local manufactured product, and so forth. So I would like to ask you this question: in which way agriculture can be, can ensure the lead in, the industrialization that you are thinking about, in order to become a need for a niche for job creation in Africa, among others. Agriculture, the lead, and become the niche for job creation in Africa. Thank you. in
Well,
2 to 3 minutes to
yeah.
answer that.
Yeah, of course, we have the traditional agriculture, which is heavily labor intensive, and to exploit, to make agriculture, to produce some niche, you have to be able to identify some of those specific agricultural products that have demand and that require some technology and so on. Mostly technology which is not like, as you've said in your opening, technology that is compatible with the labor-intensive technologies. And as we said, in the agricultural sector, it is very important to exploit those possibilities if households are encouraged to form themselves in cooperative societies that are able to access and work together, access inputs, access the markets together.
Thank you very much. We could think about, increasing the productivity in Africa, on the top, in summarizing what you said, the improve or the transform agriculture that we are thinking about in addressing the issue of labor in Africa. Now, let us move to your second question. The question is to know, if there are skill mismatches in Africa, and will there be any in the future if we do have skill mismatch now? If not, would we have some in the future? So you have 7 minutes to respond to that.
Right. I will start perhaps by first indicating that the various drivers, issues that make the demand for skills an issue and important include like new technologies, where in situations where there are equally managerial exigencies, and new ways of organizing work, and changing industrial demand and consumer demand, and rising inequality. But in order to at least to make sense on what one may have to say on skills mismatch, it is important, first of all, to mention some few typologies of skills mismatches, which could include something like skills deficit. And this simply means a situation where low equilibrium between demand and supply of skills is attained, but at very low levels. Then you have skills shortages, which refers to situation where employers cannot fill vacancies for skilled labor. You can also talk about skills gap, which refers to situation where in a company, when employees are perceived by their managers as lacking some basic competencies needed to carry out their task. And the most important for us is the so-called over-education or underemployment, which refers to a situation where a person has a higher level of education than required by the job he or she is doing. This concept is linked to skills underutilization, yet we know very well that education is just a loose measure of skills. The employment situation in sub-Saharan Africa is largely characterized by underemployment, which generally hovers around between 70 and 80%. The proliferation of the informal sector is among the factors that explain underemployment, this underemployment phenomenon. The informal sector typically employs about 90% of the employed labor force, while there is indication that jobs created in the formal private sector are less than 5% and are decreasing. Yet the private sector is expected to be the engine of growth, and job creation in the next 2 decades. The main causes of underemployment and poor performance of the labor market include weak capacity of the productive sector to create decent jobs, inadequacy of the quality of the labor force in relationship to the human capital requirements of the quality of the labor force in relationship to the human capital needs of the economy, non-compliance of regulations on labor standards by companies, inadequate funding for skills development, and mismatch between training and employment. Interventions to combat the underemployment situation in sub-Saharan Africa may include strengthening national labor markets and skills observatories to monitor and report labor market skills requirements at regular intervals, including training volumes and quality, encouraging enterprises to create and promote internship programs, creating public vocational training centers, popularizing apprenticeship programs for youth who lack basic skills or need to upgrade previously acquired skills, incentivizing formal sector companies to organize on-the-job training programs and return such employees with internal promotion strategies, encouraging companies to publish detailed job descriptions and required skills for individuals and training institutions to make good choices towards preparing the future workforce, encouraging the creation and promotion of job centers, as well as private recruitment firms to act as intermediation between job supply, demand, and vocational training in order to increase the efficiency of the labor market in terms of allocating human resources to businesses and creating or promoting the creation of national employment skills review. In the next 2 decades, skills mismatches, especially underemployment, will persist in sub-Saharan Africa. The extent of the persistence, however, depends on the political will and how successful governments will be in addressing supply side and demand side labor market constraints. Future quality job creation and skills development in sub-Saharan Africa will be constrained by the huge informal sector and the pervasive rent-seeking elite, which engender a narrow tax base and inability to effectively collect taxes on landed property. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Prof. Baye. Good point that you made, starting by giving us the differences of conceptualizing skill mismatch. And then as a solution, you gave us a number of initiatives to consider: internship, apprenticeship, on the job training, publishing availabilities, and so forth. So yesterday we heard about asymmetry of information. What do you think about the asymmetry of information in the whole setting: job availability, education, competencies? And second point is expanding on that asymmetry of information. Do you think Africa is really prepared to implement the solution that you are giving? Internship, apprenticeship, on the job training, and publishing. What do you think about that? in connection to the asymmetry of information. Thank you.
Yes, as you said, information asymmetry is one of the major issues that is plaguing most aspects in the developing countries, especially the job market, where there's the demand side, there's a supply side, but they are not well coordinated. And that's the more reason that we're saying that for the authorities that be to succeed, they have to use at least elements of industrial policy. And of course, industrial policy is just a euphemism for, let's say, subsidizing, some sectors that we believe that they are, growth pushing, that they push growth forward. They are likely to, develop competitive advantages as opposed to competitive advantages, because we know that for a private firm to engage in the adoption or development of a technology, there is that public good aspect which is there, which justifies, that governments should be able to support their initiatives. And if government is supporting their initiatives, they will be able to be, to be more transparent, to define more transparent in describing their various job requirements and probably the skills needed. And if that is the case, the various institutions, the normal schools, community schools, the vocational training centers, they'll be able to know how to orientate, the potential labor force, through the training processes, the education and training processes, to better prepare them for, the future of work.
Thank you very much. I think we might have to come back to this as we give the floor to, we call the floor to intervene. Now let us listen to our third panelist on the question to know the incentive for job automation in Africa amidst demographic trend. Despite the demographic trend, we are thinking about, encouraging job automation. So we would like to hear you on that. What are the incentives for job automation? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I would like to start by thanking AERC for organizing this interesting and very timely discussion, and invite me, of course, to share my view. I mean, as it's mentioned by the previous panelist and in the other session yesterday, and this panel already, I think there are two key aspects of Africa's social structure that can influence, whether automation will take hold in any particular country or in any sector within a country. The first one is, of course, which is the focus of our panel discussion today, is the dynamics of the working age population in our continent. And the second fact, which is well discussed during yesterday's panel, is the quality of education, the quality of labor our countries are producing for the labor market, right? And I think these two aspects have opposing effect on automation and on digitalization uptake in Africa. And they will shape, the incentive from both government and private sector to promote digitalization and automation of our sectors, or in general, our economy. When we compare Africa, unlike the aging societies such as Japan or Germany, who are really leading automation and already start experiencing, job loss in the manufacturing sector, and they are typically characterized by slow population growth and aging population. Many countries in our continent have a young and growing population, and when we look at the data, as I mentioned, as it's mentioned before by the other panelists, the region population is increasing quite dramatically, right? If we compare the population size between 2000 and 2015, our population grows by 15%, which is just in 15 years. And available estimates are suggesting that there would be a high population growth in front of us. And it's expected that Africa is going to be actually the most populous continent in near future. And the size of the youth population, as highlighted by Raouf, is going to increase. Actually, the youth is expected to be increased by 90 million by 2013. So all these figures indicate that we will have more and more job seekers in the labor market, and most of them are going to be youth. And when we look at the labor market, while jobs are created every year, as mentioned by Raouf before me, the labor market is not really developing fast enough to absorb all job seekers, and it's producing really low quality of jobs, particularly for the youth and for the women. So population growth with the non-matching job is, I think, translating into a fast developing labor glut across the continent, particularly in non-professional occupation, which is resulting in a greater competition for existing jobs, where workers are pretty much easily exchangeable, right? And this might lead to a greater bargaining power for the firms and their ability to drive, the wage down, which is already down, if it's not mitigated by policy and the regulations in our continent. So, low wage in general might really affect the cost effectiveness of introducing technology and make large scale of automation unlikely in sectors which are characterized by labor abundance in general and low wage, which is typically the characteristics of our most African countries at the moment. But I think while cheap labor throughout Africa is likely to prevent the use of automation or technology, I believe education can really facilitate a greater automation, innovation, and adoption in Africa. As mentioned before, and as most of us know, education has dramatically expanded in Africa since independence. Of course, mostly primary education with lower quality than industrialized country, which are really leading in terms of automizing their economy. So I think due to low quality of education, many African youth will not have the skill that's needed in the economy that will complement and facilitate innovation. And this together with the brain drain might translate and is actually translating into a skill shortage in many of our countries. And indeed, a recent empirical evidence shows that skill mismatch is becoming a key challenge for African firms that are seeking to grow. Recent, for instance, evidence, I think, from the World Bank shows that countries such as Nigeria, Ethiopia, and South Africa reports that despite high labor and unemployment rate in these economies, firms found it very difficult in finding workers with the right skill, and it's taking more time to fill vacant position, and some firms are adjusting to this challenge by foregoing growth, which is quite bad, or outsourcing some of the tasks to service providers outside of Africa. So I think in general, growth, particularly in manufacturing sector and service sector, required skilled labor, which is largely absent in most of our country. And the manufacturing sector is not really much of a challenge, given less structural transformation happened in much of Africa, particularly in sub-Saharan African countries. Yet I think, the relatively low education level in many African countries are going to constrain, growth in most, in the service sector and in the manufacturing sector in near future. So in an environment where job seekers lack, the necessary skill, or wages are, highly abundant, I think the alternative would be to substitute, the missing skill, or replace, the high wage worker with technology or automation, right? And all this, I think, adds to the existing policy challenge in almost all African countries, which is creating stable and safe jobs for its growing population, particularly for its youth and women. I mean, as of now, we know that the vast majority of workers in Africa are self-employed, mainly in the informal sector. So change in technology will definitely have different impact in Africa compared to the rest of the world, given, the structure of the economy and our demography. In a broader sense, I think the use of advanced technology in factories will eliminate the demand for manual work that are employed, that is currently employing the majority of the youth in Africa. But overall, I think that technology might have, a double punch effect on our economies, right? First, after a period of somehow jobless growth, our economy is halted by the pandemic, and the policy measures that are taken by our governments are having, a very profound effect on most of the economies. Empirical results, for instance, from Ethiopia, Malawi, and Nigeria already confirms that, there is a devastating effect on the labor market due to the pandemic. And of course, the impact are heterogeneous and will be particularly severely affect the urban informal economy, which is expanding at the current moment. And I think mostly and the other aspect which we have to discuss is, the massive investment of advanced countries such as China in automation, might affect, the jobs that are expected to come to Africa, right? Following the cheap labor. Of course, this really depends on the sector, and there are studies which are showing that, the relationship between automation in developed world and FDI in developing countries in general and in Africa is not really linear. So, even if, the evidence in the literature is really into the extreme points, I personally think that, automation can enable many African countries. The emerging evidence, there is an emerging evidence that, technology has opened up the labor market for the youth in Africa who has the right skill. And I think Rwanda, to some extent, for instance, is teaching us or showing us that, there is a room to build or to transform agricultural dominated society into, knowledge-based economy. And if we take the mining sector, for instance, which is the most important sector for many African countries, might benefit, by underground mine automation, which can improve safety and reduce production cost, and hence, might enable creation of stable and safe jobs for our growing labor. And similarly, if we look at the financial service sector, digitalization can improve efficiency and boost financial inclusion, which most of our countries need. And I think the expansion of mobile money is an excellent example in this area. So overall, I think such productivity gain from digitalization and machine learning have really a potential to drive, substantial improvement of farm performance and the entire economy. And I think that the pandemic already taught us that we don't really afford to be behind in terms of automation. during the pandemic, our economy suffered from lacking, the sort of the telecommunication connectivity. We required to transfer, learning and working online. And I think this has opened up the eyes of policymakers and firms in their awareness on the urgency of, the need for digitalizing our economy. And I think the response of Ghana by adopting, digital finance policy is really a perfect example. Just to conclude my speech, I think to hasten these benefits, I think governments and other stakeholders must prepare, the huge labor, the labor we have in the labor market already, and the coming labor to our markets by training workers, for complex tasks, and by reforming, our regulatory framework and the education system, to meet the demand for advanced economies, which can boost efficiency and inclusive growth in general in most of our economies.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you for your very interesting point on job automation. I will summarize all you said about the productivity gain out of job automation. But you indicated this gain are conditioned on the availability of skilled workers, so education. And I would like to know, in the setting of Africa today, if you think all are set for Africa to, to grab the best out of, the job automation. From the discussion you heard yesterday, from the discussion so far, okay, if you can share with us some of the strategies that can be set up in order for Africa to mobilize, the benefits from job automation.
Thank you. I think, all the discussant here and in the previous panelists highlighted that there is still a skill gap, right? And if we continue as business as usual, we are not going to benefit from the automation, right? And I mean the COVID pandemic clearly show us how by how much we are really behind, right? And we have to really boost, for instance, our vocational schools, our education system, to produce well-educated youth that can really complement the digitalization and improve productivity and production, for instance, in the agriculture sector, to halt, poverty and hunger. I personally think that we don't have really the option to continue as business as usual, and we have to really give emphasis to the growing youth, and we have to make sure that we should invest, in developing their skill in such a way that they complement the automation and boost productivity.
Thank you, Eileen. And maybe Raouf or Baye should come in terms of, you said we should do things differently. Let us give some content to our doing things differently in order to best mobilize the benefit from job automation. There is no way Africa can escape from job automation. Okay, so we would like to hear more on that. Universities are being blamed from not, giving the right, training to youth. Yet we are saying that we should have, the best out of our educational system in order to provide the skilled workers that Africa need in order to, best use the job automation. So please, I would like to hear a bit from Raouf and from Bai. Thank you.
I can start if you want. I concur with most of the views expressed by Eleni, but I think that of course there is something big which will happen, which will continue to happen. I'm saying this also because I'm co-chairing the Intercontinental Academy in Intelligence and Artificial Intelligence, so I'm following this closely. And I can tell you that it was very difficult for me to find the representatives from Africa, which means I asked, by the way, Theo to help me in this, which means that most of our specialists are in Europe or in the United States. And as I told you, that's highly problematic because I think that Africa, in this race for artificial intelligence, and we talk about automation later, should not go the Indian way. Of course, that's we have this idea that we have just to take the niche which is available, but the story does not repeat always. You see, well, Ethiopia, for example, could take some of the sectors, labor-intensive sectors left by other countries and developed like this. But now this is a global race. And as I told you, the big difference with respect to the other episodes we have in the past is that all the countries now, North and South, feel threatened by artificial intelligence. They fear for their jobs. So they will, for example, typically their low-skilled will take the typical jobs Indians used to do from India, by basically this working on the clouds. With the development of this the capacity of storage, which is big, they don't need to go to India. So we have to be, I mean, Africa has to, well, I think Francis mentioned this also, saying that we need people, our best specialists back to Africa, that basically have some champions in artificial intelligence, which personally I couldn't find. I really tried hard to find specialists, very big world class. They are not in Africa. There are many Africans which are very good at this, but they are not in Africa, and they're not working for the African industry. That's basically one thing. Now, for automation, I'm slightly less optimistic than Eleni because I'm not sure that automation will raise fantastically the productivity numbers. That's something which is, you remember when this new economy came in 2 decades ago, everybody was saying that we will have a fantastic new era with very huge numbers, etc., etc. It turns out that it didn't work. That's the famous solo paradox, as you might know. So we need a complete reorganization. As Eleni said, there is a very important skill complementarity there. So there should be some innovative reforms in the education systems. I think it's not so complicated to envisage. The story is political will and the political economy, by the way, but this is something we have to do. We cannot just say we will automate and then we'll have the productivity growth there and then we will solve the youth bulge. That there should be very deep reforms in the education system, which should be probably more flexible as now everywhere in the world, and probably people back. And to have people back, you need to pay. That's it. That's just a few elements.
Thank you, Ralph. I think your conclusion, if we want the people back, we must be ready to pay. That's what I was thinking about when you say that Africa needs its expert back. Then I thought about the wage structure. Are we ready to pay people for their to get out of the job that they are occupying in Europe or America to get back to Africa. Then you yourself added to the point, wage should change in order to have our expert back. So we need this is one point that we should put in our recommendation. So we would like to hear by on that. Do you think the wage structure today can bring African experts back to Africa? Or if not, what should be done?
Right. It is mainly, from my own point of view, I don't think that the issue is perhaps the inability to pay the experts, but is rather the political will to be able to admit people who are likely to intoxicate the society. Like, for instance, this issue of double nationality has been hanging around, and you cannot expect somebody to come and invest a fortune, let's say, in an African country when he is not sure that he can be protected by the laws in place. As a matter of fact, we are very unfortunate in Africa that transition is very, at the political level, is slow in such a way that new ideas will equally be slow to come by. And equally, the aspect of the very huge informal sector is equally not helping matters. And it's very unlikely for us to feel that what happens elsewhere, like in the North, concerning the technologies, automation, and so on, can easily be, be observed in a linear manner in Africa. Like, for instance, I take an example of a big parastatal that buys a high-tech rice huller, very huge, with a very huge capacity. And when probably a cable, rats eat a cable, that factory or unit will stay on, for instance, 6 months, 1 year, because they are unable to obtain the spare part. But if you say a situation that they were operating, so many small machines that are mainly labor intensive, the parts can even be manufactured by the craftsmen around, at least they'll be able to move on than depending on some very high technology that rice enters, it gets hauled, it's graded, it's packaged, and you get just the final product. So those type of automations are still far-fetched as far as workability is concerned in Africa. We need simple technologies that, especially agricultural sector and other sectors, that a few people come together in a cooperative, they obtain the technology, which could be a unit for processing, an agricultural product. They buy a unit which is simple to operate and so on. So those are the aspects that it needs, I think, mainly the political will in order to do it. Indeed, if the political will is right, the diasporans are going to come back home. Then another aspect which is equally very important is the cognitive attitude of African workers. African workers are very highly dishonest. They will only work when supervision is present. In the absence of supervision, nothing takes place. So those are some of those aspects that need, changing the mindsets of Africans in order to take advantage of the technologies and what is available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Baye. 2 points out of what you said, political will is one, and you came down to simple technology. In terms of simple technology, what do you think about African experience with TVET? In Cameroon, we have a vocational school. We have what we call a lycée technique. Yet, those who graduate from those schools later on come back to the formal education, especially in our faculty of economics. We see so many of them that come to economics. And in the faculty of economics, they will, prefer to go to, how would I put it, management sciences. And getting out of, university, they will join the informal sector. So what do you think about this structure? What went wrong? What can we do in order to best mobilize, job automation today in Africa? Taking the example of the Tibet.
Well, the key constraint in this particular aspect is poverty, the inability to set up, private businesses because the credit is not there. The inability of the banks, the financial sector, or the authorities that be to set up processes that young technicians who come out from those vocational training centers and technical schools can be able to obtain at least a loan at some interesting interest rate in order to set up a business. That's the main issue. So most of the time you see these guys from the technical schools, they end up hanging around, they cannot find employment, they cannot employ themselves. The easiest thing is to come back, to the, general education, that at the end of the day, you may be able to write, a competitive exam to enter one government institution or the other, and the cycle continues. So if we don't set up, our economy in such a way that those who have the ideas can be able to obtain the financial support in order to carry out their dreams, it's an issue that will just be turning around. I don't know what answers to give, but it still goes back to the political will. Thank you.
Eleni, on the TVET yesterday, from the discussion we had somebody indicated that we should take the TVET to, another level. What do you think about that in order to best mobilize, job automation in Africa? The TVET technical school to, a level that can allow Africa. What your thought about this?
Well, I think in general, the education system in most African countries is creating a labor that's looking really for a job, right, somewhere. We are not training our youth to be entrepreneurs, right, and to enable them to innovate something. And if we continue like this, and if the economy is not really producing, enough number of jobs, that's going to absorb the labor which is expanding, right? I mean, it's not. I mean, it will create other social problems such as crime. So I think it's not only for the TVET, but in general, our education system should introduce, for instance, entrepreneurship at earlier stage in primary school, preferably, and we should try to create a labor that that innovate and create a job. And if we do that, implicitly, I hope we will be in a position to complement automation, which we cannot escape. It's really coming. It might be difficult, in some sectors. If, for instance, if we take the garment sector in general, it really needs human, right? You cannot automate 100% the whole sector, and these offshore jobs might be keep coming to countries such as my home country, Ethiopia, but not others, right? In manufacturing automobiles, you need the precision, and now technology is really showing us that we can automate that, and we shouldn't really sit back and expect these jobs to come. So in some sense, we have to really change our education system in general, and should be able to produce someone who innovates and creates jobs.
Thank you, Eleni. In short, we should do things differently. Now let us move to the floor before coming back to, our panelists. Let us hear from the floor what they think, what are their experiences in terms of the interaction between demography and labor market. If you have a question, if you have, you would like to complement what, to add on what panelists have said. So we would like to hear from the floor. Please give your your attachment or else that we would like to hear from you, from the floor. Okay. Oh.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that participants can also use the chats to send their questions, right?
Thank you very much.
Something to, yeah.
Thank you very much. Actually, I wanted to announce that at the beginning, but I almost forgot about it. Thank you very much for being there. And please, if you have a question on that, on the
hi, I'm Ramiro Albrier.
Yes, Ramiro. Yes.
From CPEC and from Latin America. So I'm going to, was just trying to listen to you through my own lens from the Latin American perspective. And I hear little about education investments. In a way, Africa is, when we look at the global demographics, Africa is going to be the future, right? So in terms of working age population, in terms of population, but in a way, Africa needs to do some things right now in order to benefit in the future, right? And I believe that one of the key issues regarding this intertemporal analysis is investing in human capital. So I'm saying for children, not only for those who are in the labor market or about to enter into the labor market. So I wonder if you can add some comments on how is Africa doing regarding these first investments in human capital.
Thank you, Ramiro. Any other question? Maybe we will start by getting the view of the panelists on your question on investment in human capital. Actually, each one of the points that you analyze to get down to the human investment in human capital. So what do you think about that? Where does Africa stand about investing in human capital? I will start from Raouf.
Yes, well, we have mentioned this several times, that of course, as in any country in the world, this is about, if I think I share the view of Eleni, that's something like an inexorable trend. Automation will continue its course, and we have to take the best from it. So we were more concentrating on, of course, the adequacy of the in the workplace with this new technological trends. But of course, to avoid to have only a displacement effect of the automation, using the terminology of Acemoglu, we have to develop this kind of specific education, flexible, etc., and something is done. Now, I believe pretty much in one theory, which is, of course, education starts from the primary school, which is something I already mentioned about speeding, for example, speeding the demographic transition would pass by this. I have been working in Kivu in Eastern Congo for many years. Then I can tell you that many, many girls were not. Of course, same thing in Marruecos, to use your language. So this is, of course, quite known. And I think there is I think in North or Sub-Saharan Africa, I think the problem, Ramiro, is not really primary education, although I would tell you that the same question you could ask it also for France. The level of primary school is big. In Africa, there's a lot of progress done. The problem is, as we say, how to develop this specific vintage human capital, which would complement perfectly the new technologies. I would perfectly take the argument that, of course, we have to start from the primary school, that the students have to learn how to manipulate computers, etc., etc. But the key point is to develop along the way these specific skills. And unfortunately, we are very far from the targets so far.
Thank you, Raouf. How about Baye? To be specific, you gave some thought on, developing human, investing in human. If you can be specific on some of the points, that would respond to Ramiro's concern.
Yeah, thank you. What Ramiro is saying is perfectly correct, because in order to even exploit, the window of change that we are talking about, the youth bulge, because before the youth bulge, there was something like a triangular age structure where majority of the people are the under 15. And those under 15, that is the period that a lot of investments in education, in health, and other services has to take place, so that as they are moving up in the bell-shaped form where the bulge takes place at between the working age group, if those children were not properly educated, it will be difficult for them to find their feet. And in my presentation, I mentioned about laggards, those who were not fortunate, to obtain the education, were not fortunate to be able to access the necessary health facilities. They need to catch up, and that is a serious issue that has to take place. So if a country fails at that level, of the under 15, to get the under 15 at the level that they are comfortable with the basic ICTs, that they are comfortable with some basic knowledge and so on, it will be difficult for the countries to catch up at the youth bulge segment in order to exploit, the window of opportunity that is very available. We have concentrated on a particular segment that is the middle, but indeed, for any success to take place, many things would have happened at the base. If many things fail to happen at the base, it will be very, very difficult to catch up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Baye. To Eleni, what do you think, what can you add to Ramiro's concern following the responses that have been given by Raouf and Baye?
They both mentioned in their presentation, in their response, that it's really important to invest in human capital, right? Given the digital sector, which is going to be our future, requires, I think, a different skill set, including a cognitive ability, social behavioral ability, which is mentioned by Faye, which is constraining, I think, a lot of development in the continent, and critical thinking. The education and the training sector should, adapt and expand to build these new skills of the labor. And of course, this need intensive investment in the education sector. But in the meantime, it's very difficult, to disentangle, investment in education with health, right? Investment is required in the health sector as well to reduce, child stunting, which is going to affect, their adulthood cognitive skill and their ability to think critically and innovate. So in general, I think we need to invest in human capital, which involves, investment in terms of infrastructure in the education sector and in the health sector as well.
Thank you, Eleni. Now we will get additional question, first from John and then from Theophile. John, Carita.
Yeah, hello, everyone. My name is John. PhD candidate at the WITS Business School. And the discussion is very interesting. And my question is, I'll start by giving a background. Then when you look at Africa and our occupational structure, most of the people are involved in agriculture. Most people are involved in agriculture, directly or indirectly. So if we are to deal with this problem of the youth bulge, then we have to fix our agriculture. We have to make sure that the youth get into agriculture one way or the other. So my question to the panelists and to the floor is, how best can we have our youth engage in agriculture? And how can we facilitate that? Because it will go a long way in solving the problem at hand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that the question was posed to Baye, and but still we need to come back to respond to John. Agriculture is, I would say that agriculture involves the majority of Africans. And now we are talking about some kind of industrialization, how agriculture, what do we think will be done in the sector in order for the sector to become the niche for job for the youth. Okay, so we will come to that, but let us get Theophile's question so that it might be related to the John's question, so that we let panelists respond to that. So please, Theophile.
Madam Chair, yes, I'm sorry. As part of the organizing committee, I should let the floor to participants who wanted to ask questions. There is one question in the chat, so please, I won't ask any question until we take all the questions in the chat and those wanting to ask questions. So let me remove my hand. Sorry for that. I was just inclined to highlight the aspect of the gender in the investment in human capital in Africa. And some studies have pointed this, that girls and boys do not receive the same investment in human capital in education. And some studies point this, and I think Eleni can also highlight this kind of results that we can see in the literature. Thank you, but let me remove my hand. I'm not supposed to ask questions.
Okay, thank you very much. John, do you have another point to make? Or if not, you should, your hand is still up. I don't know if you still wanted to make
No, I'm done. Let me remove that hand.
Thank you. So let us get back to our panelists, agriculture, and providing job to the youth in Africa. The whole of the thing of the question, the first of this question get us back to what I put.
Yeah, I'll call you later.
To Francis on
I'm in a conference.
Yes. Francis, mute.
Okay.
Is Francis mute?
On.
We will hear from Eleni first, and then to Raouf, and finally to Francis. Okay, Eleni, what do you think about the question? What do you have to say to John?
Well, I think John really raised a very interesting and very important question, right? We know that we are dependent on agriculture. And I think by now we know that we have to strengthen this sector, right, to feed our growing population. To do that, I think we can use some development or technology, for instance, with the climate change. Now building a system where farmers get a warning ahead of time before a disaster could be one way of helping the sector, right, to absorb more labor in the sector and improve our food production, right? But again, for me personally, it come back to the education system in Africa, right? I personally think that we have to put to agriculture in our education curriculum, right? So that we can create an incentive for the youth to engage in agriculture, but with a better human capital, complementing new technologies such as use of fertilizer or seed, and facilitating access to land and of course a financial resource which will enable the youth to engage in this sector and promote more production or improve yield could be a good strategy to improve the performance of the sector and absorb some of our labor to the agriculture sector, which we require in our economy, I guess.
Thank you, Eleni. Before I give the floor to Raouf and to Baye, I would like to read this concern of Ramiro. He said, the comment on agriculture is good, but could a high-tech agriculture absorb a lot of jobs? Okay, could. You can get the question from the discussion box. Could a high-tech agriculture absorb a lot of jobs? So please,
I can respond quickly, but okay. This question, Bernadette, you can ask it for everything, basically, not only for agriculture. Yes. You can say that automation in industry would also displace jobs. So it's a question you will see in all the papers, in all the reports. And I would say the following. I have supervised a cooperation mission for the Belgian government in Eastern Kivu for more than 8 years. And the objective was to increase productivity in agriculture in Eastern Kivu. And I could see immediately the problem of reluctance of peasants to adopt new technologies. So this is a fundamental point, and I struggled a lot there, I can tell you. Even fertilizers, and free. My point here is, it's also related to the point raised by Eleni. But I will put it in a more global stuff. Africa is a wonderful continent by its nature, by its people. And then we have a formidable, very important potential in all the things related to conservation, sustainable development, things like this. And if you look at the literature now in Institute for Advanced Study, for example, all over the world, the story of sustainable agriculture is extremely important. It could be the case that even without job creation, I think I would not bet on agriculture to solve the youth bulge in Africa, John. I would not bet on this. And Ramiro is absolutely right in pointing this. But it is we have their potential, very big potential. We have nature, we have water, and then we have all the natural capital which is needed to foster, I would say, a kind of development, especially with the help of automation and new technologies, which will be much cleaner than in many countries in the world. So I would stress this sustainable development part, and there something we can do which is complementary with the assets of the continent.
Okay, Raouf, on your point that your response to John, that you will not much count on agriculture to solve the youth bulge in Africa. But we should not look at agriculture, the traditional agriculture. Here we are talking about improve productivity in agriculture. Do you think that the improved productivity in agriculture could not transform agriculture into a niche for job creation for Africans? We are talking about.
I can give you the example of many other countries which have been undertaking this for years, like Australia. Australia is counting a lot on the productivity gains and job gains are not obvious.
Okay, thank you very much. And we can think about, the industrialization based on agriculture, transforming agricultural product, integrating Africa into, the global value chain. Agriculture is at the base for integrating Africa. One kind of think about that. Even basing the integration into the global value chain would not help, agriculture to become some niche for job creation. The question to you, to Baye as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Baye now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I believe that agriculture has a huge potential in Africa as far as providing jobs to the youths. But it is very important to get the fundamentals right. As I indicated in my speech, if the youth are going to agriculture as individuals, it's difficult for them to succeed. But if the youths can be helped, to form cooperative societies, as I indicate, so that they can have privileged access, to land, privileged access, to water, privileged access to credit, privileged access to the basic technologies that are available. It is possible for them to set up modern farms. And if they set up modern farms, they'll be able to process what they are producing, and they'll be able to access the domestic as well as, the international value chain. So the basic thing is to get, this change the mindsets, as I indicated, because the experience that I've got in the rural areas, those who are there as labor, they are usually not, they don't have very good non-cognitive skills, as I said, because their attitude to work is not that which is expected, or is not that which can really lead to growth. But if you, the answer to me is making sure that you form them into some form of groups, be them cooperative groups, and give them access to credit and ease them access to the various inputs that are available, it will be possible for them to produce, transform, and market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Baye. Any other question from the floor? Any question from the floor? I don't see any overhand. Teofil, anything that you would like to add to what has been said? Okay, I can read from the chat that, okay, we should look forward to improving our industrial base, where our agricultural produce will be used. I think the solution to youth bulge in sub-Sahara is a structural transformation where we move from a dependent on agricultural production to industrialization. It can contribute to an economy in two ways, through value added to gross domestic product, increase in the share of employment of industry. So this is a point made by Nokolo Ifeo. This is what Ifeo think about all of the discussion that we are going through this morning. What do you think about that? Okay, if not, we take a good this as a good suggestion to feed into the discussion, and we will move to the conclusion. What Raouf, Francis, and Eleni, what could be their last word on the question put to them, as well as a question raised by the floor? So I will start from Eleni, then to Francis and Raouf. What could be your last point on all the discussion that we had, starting from the question especially put to you? Thank you. Eleni?
Thank you, Prof. I think my last word would be, the innovation, automation, even the development of the artificial intelligence globally really present an opportunity for African countries. And whether we like it or not, it's going to displace some work, right? But as a continent and as a country, we have to be really ready, right, to complement what's coming and try to benefit from out of it and create, the job for the growing population. So I really encourage, policymakers and other actors, to build the different sectors, adopt different regulations, which will attract, both the diaspora and other innovators to invest in Africa. And I also believe that, the African countries should continue in making, our digital infrastructure and connectivity improving over time, right? We are better off now, but it's not enough. And if we take one lesson from COVID pandemic, is that we are still really behind, and we have to really build our infrastructure so that we create a better future for our youth. Yeah.
Thank you, Eleni. Now to Baye. What would be your last word? Yeah.
I will start by indicating that a lot of progress has been made in the educational sector in Africa. But what has been the problem is for those who have acquired those technical knowledge to be able to set up themselves. Secondly, there is need for a political will to follow, the line of taking care of these issues. Then equally, as far as agriculture is concerned, it can, the window of opportunity, that agriculture can give can only be obtained if genuine agricultural cooperatives are put in place and the various facilities, they have access to the various facilities to produce, to process, and to trade. then it is equally important to change the mindset of young people in Africa so that they should be able, to develop useful non-cognitive skills that are friendly to the future of work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Baye. And now to Raouf.
Yeah, I will be brief. I will say something really simple. As the other said, I have a dream, and the dream is the following. I will tell you. It's and this dream is that we take advantage of this, the whole continent, of this automation, etc. Not only to deal with this youth urge, which is a real problem, but I would say it will be solved along the way, but to figure out a new type of structural transformation. It's like leapfrogging, like it happened in Kenya and in Africa with this mobile phone technology. Of course, it's wishful thinking what I'm saying, but this is, I would say, given the numbers, we have talked about the numbers are dramatic in terms of structural change, etc. Although I agree with Francis that a lot of progress has been made in education and in digital literacy. Our unique chance is to take advantage of the new waves of innovation to build up a new kind of structural transformation, which will probably leapfrog the simple one we have in mind. That's the typical theory, moving from agriculture to the industry. And I agree with Eleni and with Francis that depends a lot on political economy. This means that it depends a lot on the level of the quality of governance in Africa, which is very low. And everybody knows this. That's it.
Thank you very much, Raouf. At this point of time, let us go through what, the last word of everyone. I think we have a convergence of points. We know that a lot has been done, but to the question that, the link between demography and labor market in Africa, a lot need to be done. And all goes around, investment in human capital. And in terms of investment in human capital, taking advantage of the dynamism that we are observing in terms of automation, we should think about education of women, because we are talking about, demographic transition, and who is at the core of, the transition? Women. So we should think about, women empowerment, women education, and all of that cast on structural transformation in Africa. Maybe structural transformation of agriculture can be a solution, but what matters is structural transformation in order for Africa to mobilize, the dynamism that digitalization is bringing to Africa. A lot exists, but a lot is still to be done for a best mobilization of the benefits. And at this point, I would like to give the floor to, the ED, and first to Théophile, then to the ED. I'm blessed to have, the ED in my group, and I will not terminate, I will not conclude without hearing from, the ED. So Théophile, and then the ED.
Thank you, Bernadette. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I can only join you to thank our panelists for the strong contribution to this roundtable. And we still have, and also the participants, and also you, Madam Chair, for chairing this roundtable. And just to remind you that we have one more roundtable tomorrow, and I'm still inviting you to join this roundtable, and we will have the closing remark tomorrow, the closing of the event, which will be given by ED, by Njuguna. So please, over to you, Njuguna.
Oh, thank you very much. And by the way, Bernadette, that was a great session. I kept moving from one group to another, and that is interesting. We can do that in a virtual platform. So I was contributing to the other one. I was coming here to listening, and I think the issues around here about demography and labor market is very, very important. And obviously, when we have the youth bulge, we have had studies on the youth unemployment in Africa, and we ask ourselves where we are going. But the whole issue is that the economy is not able to absorb the youth. But it is not because they're not making job opportunities, but I think it's that the economic activity is not diversified enough. We have talked about economic transformation for many years. Maybe we have to ask ourselves, what is the magic for economic transformation and diversification? These are issues that will be with us, especially when we define the work in the global south. This is going to be very important for us. So it is. We are getting ready to see how it will be done. But also importantly, even with the current pandemic and the kind of consequences we are finding, economic activity, lockdowns, poverty, inequality increasing, you can see that we have a lot on our table to talk about post-COVID economic recovery strategy. And one of them will involve what happens to the demographic dividend, what are we going to do about youth employment, and how are we going to structure our labor markets so that they are actually responsive to the economic activity. These are very important issues. And as Theo has said, we still have one more day to go tomorrow. And after tomorrow, by the end of the day tomorrow, perhaps we'll perhaps define the way forward in terms of this work on Global South, and at the same time, have some closing remarks. Thank you very much for participation in today's panel. I'm very excited about the works and the ideas that are coming up. And I think today I was able to go to both. Yesterday I was confined to one because I was also moderating one. So essentially today I was quite maybe more flexible. Thank you very much, and good evening from this end.
Thank you, Njuguna. Thank you, Raouf. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Eleni. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, AERC, for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to participate. Thank you so much.
And let me thank the moderator for a great job. Well done. Thank you, Bernadette.
Oh, thank you. And see you all tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Okay, see you tomorrow. Okay. So, Berta, the hall is for you now to close the session. Victor, thank you very much.